down the road. But it's relevant to the people and to the cause if you go out and stand on that rail line, or if you shut down that highway, because they run those things through our communities because our land was cheap. And white people didn't want them in their communities. They didn't want these things in their backyard, but they put them through ours. And we organized for a year. And I took people to places and said, this is your spot. And if communities didn't have those things available to them, then we took other communities and we said, support this community. When they close this highway, you go and you stand with them. A woman, I remember calling me from Nipigon. And she said, under the new Child Protection Act, they're coming into our communities and they're taking our children away. What can we do about that? And another woman said, you know, you're talking militant, you're talking struggle, you're talking about picking up guns. How can we do that? And I said, ma'am, all you have to do in this community is go out and stand on that road. Because this road connects two cities and goods can't be transported from one to the other. And she looked at me and I says, can you stand on the road? Can you stand on the fucking road for your kids? To stop this government from taking your babies from your home? Can you stand on the fucking road?
No.
And that was the message we carried.
No.
From community to community to community. And the day for that was to take effect on October 16th. And I remember driving to Toronto October 15th, about 15 minutes before midnight, and we were coming in to do a hit on the financial district in Toronto. And on 680 News they said, Mike Harris has announced his resignation. And everything that we had built for then stopped. And when the sun came up on the morning of the 16th, it wasn't about a campaign of economic disruption to bring down the economy of this province. It turned into a celebration because Mike Harris had quit. He'd resigned. But one thing struck me at that time that I've never forgot was that all the organizing that had been done for that year in those communities, the potential was never realized. They were afraid to see what would happen on that day. And it was easier for them and better for them that they didn't know the answer. We started a campaign to have land brought back to our community 5.5 months ago, 6.5 months ago. And I didn't forget about that, the October 16th campaign. Because I knew the power that existed within that economic disruption idea. That we as First Nations communities could start to deal with our issues if we took it on a similar campaign that was brought down by the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty. And so the community of Tyendinaga said 6.5 months ago, take this land back. You have the authority and the mandate of our community to do whatever it takes to bring this land back. One thing that's existed for so long with First Nations people is that we've always been the victims. We have always been the victims. The residential school experience that people talk about commenced in the early 1900s left 50,000 of our children dead. In those schools, the mortality rate was 40% at the minimum, and some as high as 75%. 50,000 of our children died while going to school. Everybody says that's old news. That's history. Well, the last school closed in 1984. And that's when our children stopped dying, when they were going to school. Today, we have 300 communities across this country whose babies get sick when they drink the water. We live in poverty. We live in isolation. We have all the indignities to bear. I listened to CBC this morning, and they talked about the suicide rate. Well, in the last 10 years, the suicide rate in First Nations communities have doubled. And they were talking about a strategy that wasn't working. 7 years in on a strategy to reduce Native suicides, and it hasn't worked. It's doubled. And we've always maintained this position forever, that we are the victims and we have to come out and appeal to the compassion of people in order to bring our issues forward and have them considered with any respect or regard. In activism, the only issues that ever get put forward, Dudley George was killed. In Caledonia, Caledonia was an issue when the OPP went in there a year ago and attacked men, women, elders, children, and they created victims in that scenario. In Brant Church, people remember that because our boats were run over by the DFO and people were beaten as they struggled in the water to swim. It's all about victims. 6.5 months ago, when the community of Tyendinaga said, take this land back by whatever means is necessary, but we don't want to be the victims. And so we started. In November, we posted lands. There was a development that was to go forward. We were putting up signs. The night before, we'd been told that because Caledonia was going on, that if the situation turned bad, we should be expected to be dealt with either by the RCMP or the military, because the OPP's resources were in Caledonia. So as we were putting up signs to mark the land, we look up the road, and what's coming over the hill and down the highway but a convoy of military vehicles. And we went out in the road and we said, if you want to fight, we're going to fight on our terms. And we stopped that convoy. We stopped them on the highway. The police came. After about a half an hour of discussions, they said, they don't have guns, Shawn. They're not here to fight. And I remember I said to them, well, then they are fucked. As we are ready. One thing led to another, and there was fish flying. Shit happened. And they subsequently left, and we got charged for that. And we told them then, we're sick and tired of having these things and developers say, we're going to start building a house, we're going to start a condominium project. When that happened, we said, if we're called out again, we're going to punish you. January, they announced a $30 million gated community on our lands.